Much, Louise, and welcome everybody. I'm really delighted to be doing this webinar today and to be able to share my expertise in customer experience management, and just delighted that you're taking an interest in this topic and that it's of interest to you. My intention today is that every one of you can take something away that you can put to use straight away. And if I achieve more than that, then that will be absolutely brilliant. So before we do that, I'm just going to launch straight into a poll, just to get a sense of where you are right now and how the pandemic is affecting your business. Because of course, one of the promises that I made about this webinar was that it was to help organisations and businesses through some pain points of the current pandemic in terms of how it affects their business. So the poll is completely confidential. Louise from Cambridge Network is handling the poll, and all we can see come back is the results, not the individual details. So if you're happy to share with 3 options, and this will help me to ensure that I cater the webinar for you, because what I've discovered is that the pandemic has affected every business differently. So the 3 options there are: business has not been affected except for perhaps working from home, so little or no effect on sales. Your business has been detrimentally affected, sales have decreased, or business has increased, sales are up. So if you'd like to do the poll.
Okay. Yeah, we've given them nearly a minute. Oh, one more person has just said something. I'm really ready to share. Quickly get your votes in. Okay, shall we finish it there? And I will share the results. There you go.
Right. So 50-50. Okay. So nobody here today is in a situation where sales are up. So half of you, little or no effect on sales, and then half of you detrimentally affected. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So in today's webinar, obviously, COVID has had a massive impact on businesses across the world. Just in the UK, we've seen that the economy has contracted by 20%. And the implications, though, are not just economic. And so one of the key differences about this crisis when compared to others is that this time we're all in this together. Businesses, government, and individuals. And it's this being there together that has an influence on customer expectations of your business. So customer needs and behaviours have changed, and we've witnessed some of these changes, such as the priority given to health and the move to online shopping. But other changes in customer behaviours we're yet to see play out. And that has implications for all businesses, not just those already affected economically. So today I'm going to look at 3 things. I'm going to help you understand what those changes are to customer emotions and behaviours, why this matters, and we'll look at the customer experience tools that you can use to capture the change and how you can use those tools to identify resulting pain points and how you can turn these into opportunities for your business. Just before we do that, I just thought it's really useful just to clarify what's meant by customer experience. Often when I say I work in customer experience, people say, oh yes, customer service. And both are equally important, but they are different. And actually dictionaries don't really help because every dictionary gives a different description, and customer experience is not even in the Oxford Dictionary. So that wouldn't help you. So the most common definition is on the slide, and essentially customer experience boils down to how a customer perceives all of their interactions with your company or brand. So customer experience sits at the intersection of your brand, product, customer engagement, transactions, and customer care. And it's broader than just than customer experience, and often requiring collaboration and effort across the whole business. Whereas customer service, which is in the Oxford Dictionary, refers to the assistance and advice provided. So a good example might be, for instance, if you're browsing on a website to purchase a product, that is part of your experience, even before you've actually purchased something, and even before you've actually entered the sort of obtaining a service from the company. So today we're going to look at the customer experience element and also customer experience management, which is when you look proactively at the experience you're giving your customers. So before I do that, I just thought if I tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here today talking to you about customer experience. I've been leading teams in the operational customer service world for a little over 30 years. 17 years as a senior manager in financial services and 14 years as a director in a national membership organisation. And these roles have given me a hands-on experience of improving and transforming customer service and customer experience in both B2B and B2C environments. Last year, I was approached to be a judge at the UK Customer Experience Awards, which I'd never heard of before. But I was curious, and as I looked into it a bit more, I became aware that there was a whole discipline and profession dedicated to helping businesses improve their customer experience. And once I discovered the tools and practices, I could see immediately how much benefit the application of these tools can have to improving customer experience, customer acquisition, retention, and advocacy. And I realised that had I known about these tools earlier in my career, it would have made things a lot easier. So I decided to become qualified and did a double qualification in customer experience. And seeing that the market in Cambridge was relatively underserved with consultants who advise on this relatively new area of customer experience management, I set up my own consultancy, combining my expertise in customer experience and agile change. And actually, during lockdown, I've been able to put all of these experience to use to help companies. One of the things I've done is volunteered to be a customer experience consultant in the Customer Experience World Games, which was set up to help worthwhile causes facing challenges as a result of the pandemic, and providing a customer experience solution. So I've been able to help and advise a cat cafe, which had to close because of the pandemic, but still the owners have to go and feed the cats and look after the cats every day. A fundraising charity, an AI-based physical and mental well-being app for children, and also a community transport challenge. So I've been able to collaborate with some amazing customer experience professionals, and I've been on the podium 4 times. So I've got the 5th and last challenge this week. So fingers crossed for that one. So that was me. And now we're at our webinar. The Corona Coaster. I wonder how many of you have been on the Corona Coaster the past few months. I know that I have. Just one thing, the daily briefings will challenge anyone to stay sane and move up the Corona Coaster. So basically, the Corona Coaster is the roller coaster of emotions we all feel as we go through the pandemic. Some things in our situations or daily interactions make you feel good. Others, maybe situations we've no control over, or things we see in our newsfeed make you feel downright miserable. And these all contribute to the roller coaster of emotions we've experienced during the pandemic. So from a customer experience perspective, it's really important to be aware of this, and something to mull over as we go through the webinar is, how do you think your company has made your customers feel during the pandemic? Have you been a business that has made them feel good and so maybe lifted them up to the top of the corona coaster, or one that's added to their woes? So a good thing to think about is, what is your assumption of your customers' experience when dealing with your business? One great local example that I think exemplifies the corona coaster emotions from a number of perspectives is the Cambridge Fruit Company, who before COVID, before the coronavirus, their main business was sourcing and delivering fruit boxes to schools and offices. Some of you might even have been customers. And at the start of lockdown, with most businesses closed, the owner was devastated at the thought of, maybe needing to close his business, or furlough his staff, or let his staff go. But he was actually quick to try and change his business model to deliver fruit to families. But something really amazing happened, and that was a tweet from a follower in New York that changed everything for him. So if you're following this story, you might be thinking about where he is now on the corona coaster. And so he donated £150 for 5 fruit boxes for vulnerable families. And others followed, donating boxes of fruit for staff at Addenbrooke's. Existing customers of Cambridge Fruit followed suit, and they donated their usual weekly box to worthy causes in Cambridge. And so now the Cambridge Fruit Company was delivering to NHS staff and to vulnerable families. And so this story is really heartwarming. And in this one example, there's so many emotions I think that we can all relate to. Initially worry, fear, lack of financial security, lack of control. And then on the flip side, joy, some certainty, compassion, purpose, and community. And so all really positive sort of emotions that lift you up. So this is a story with a happy ending, but for most of us, the ups and downs have been more cyclical. Each day, perhaps we're experiencing different ups and downs. And certainly that's still continuing with economic uncertainty, health anxiety, concern about lockdown easing, and getting used to whatever is the new reality. So I'm going to ask you a question now to type into the chat. And that is, what do you think your customers' key emotional needs have been during the pandemic? Let me know in the chat. And of course, we are still in the pandemic. And we can just see if we're all seeing the same things, and whether they're emotions that put people on the top or the bottom of the corona coaster or not. Okay. So what can we see in the chat?
Can you see the comments in the chat?
I can see. Right, okay. So I can see, so we've got people are anxious, they need guidance, stability, so sort of the opposite side there. Can't get used to not being able to plan ahead, so a lack of control. It's difficult to summarize, So they've replicated our own, or as you've just been describing. So I think there's, you know, there's uncertainty as well, uncertainty about how everybody might be feeling. Okay, and somebody said, Theo, I thought CX is an IT term only. So no, it's broader, it covers sort of the customer experience, the experience that the customer's having throughout the whole organisation. So through every single touch point, and it's really how the customer perceives their interactions with your organisation. Often we hear user experience as it relates to sort of digital. Okay, so let's see. So some of what we've said fits with insights that Matista have identified. And Matista are an organisation in the US that look at emotional intelligence, emotional connection intelligence. And what they've identified is that when they've looked at the coronavirus and customer emotions, they call out 5 critical human motivations or emotional needs that are foremost in customers' minds during the pandemic. And these are the 5 that are on the slide there. You can see that some of these are the same emotional needs that you've seen in your customers. For example, anxiety and lack of control and uncertainty read across to many of these different motivations. So despite your customers not showing up and having their emotions written on their face, plain for everyone to see, like this young girl, you are seeing still some of the emotions. You can well imagine some of the emotions that your customers might be feeling right now, and the same things as the Matista Insights. And so it's key to understand these at the moment. And the reason why it matters is because the business that do things to satisfy these emotional needs will leave customers at the top of the corona coaster. And those that pay little attention will create a situation where the customers will associate that brand with feelings at the bottom of the corona coaster. So to emphasize the importance of this area, I'm just going to stick with emotions a bit longer before we go into looking at some of the tools. And recent research by Endelman Trust, carried out in just this short space of time, shows that 90% of customers believe that not only must brands look after their customers, but they must also look after their employers and suppliers. If they don't, 71% of global customers say that if they don't, they'll lose their trust forever and are unlikely to return. And so this research was carried out with 12,000 customers across 12 countries, some of which are sort of further along the or ahead on the pandemic than the UK. And so they found that the change in customer needs and behaviours will have a lasting influence on future loyalty and buying decisions. And something that's worth mentioning is that although many of these findings concern B2C preferences, they do hold important messages for B2B as well. And this is because increasingly B2B customers are looking for the same level of customer experience that they have in the B2C environment. And so, for example, if you're in the B2B environment and you're purchasing a new software platform to help support your business, you expect the same level of customer experience through the sales and onboarding process that you might get from, say, Amazon if you're purchasing a product from them. So taking into account customers' changing emotional priorities, it's no surprise that it is impacting on customer behaviours. And another area where there's research to support this change is in the area of patience and communication. And so until now, customers through the crisis may have been very understanding and patient, but they do want to be kept informed of any delays. And what's key about this is that 70% of customers say they're unlikely to shop again if they're not informed of the delay. And this is just as important for B2B as B2C, as customers increasingly have the same expectations. So what should you do? The same research has some advice. Companies who care and innovate during this crisis and anticipate how customers will change their habits will build stronger relationships that will endure long beyond the crisis passing. And so what are the things you can do? So I'll just explain these 4 points. So basically show up and do your part. Customers think brands have got a vital role to play, and now's not the time to disappear, but they want you to show up and use all your resources creatively to make a difference. Don't act alone, and by that, they really want you during the crisis to join forces with others, and most critically government. And that's because the public trust the private sector more than government, and so they want to see you acting with, or they respect you acting with government. So solve, don't sell, that's obviously pretty obvious, but find meaningful, try and find meaningful solutions to the problems people are facing today. And then finally, communicate with emotion, compassion and facts. So people are reassured by positive brand actions and commitments, and then communicate with empathy to help both inform and calm. So across Cambridge, I've seen so many examples of companies doing all of these things, and not wanting to embarrass anyone here from Cambridge Network, but they did just this. They completely changed their offer with momentum to a virtual one, and were supported by many firms in Cambridge who joined with them, who collaborated with them to offer Cambridge Network members some services and solutions to the current crisis. And another that I know intimately, as my husband works there, is Endomag, a Cambridge-based medtech company, where they're a nanotechnology breast cancer prevention and treatment company. And they have moved heaven and earth to ensure that breast cancer treatments were made available to those that needed them. So for instance, where there's been these new coronavirus-free cancer treatment hubs, pledging money and resources to ensure that surgeons still had access to their technology. And there are hundreds more stories like this just in Cambridge alone. So just a quick thing in terms of what was it like actually before the crisis. It's worth reminding ourselves that even before this, emotions and the applications of emotional intelligence did matter. It did matter before, and the impact it had on sales and customer retention and advocacy. So all buyers are affected by their emotions. We're not always aware of this. I think it's about 95% of human behaviour is unconscious. And so we all make emotional decisions when we buy, and not always a logical decision. For example, you might have two well-known brands, Tesco's and Sainsbury's, and which one do you prefer? Sometimes the decision is more emotional than logical. Something to just be aware of is that women control more of the buying decisions, and they tend to make decisions based on emotion and feeling. So it's 67% in the UK. In a B2B situation, it's probably closer to 50%. But what might surprise you is that the B2B have a stronger emotional connection. And that's thought to be because there is more invested, both in time, money, and effort. And there's more likely to be a personal relationship with someone, say, providing some computer software, than there is perhaps when you're purchasing a pair of trousers or a shirt. So if we accept that emotions matter, and that those emotions and behaviours have been affected by the crisis, how can the tools of customer experience help? How do you capture these shifts in customer behaviour and what it means for the experience you're providing for your customer? And this is where I'm going to turn to my customer experience toolkit. I just want to say we spent a lot of time on emotion, and that was actually deliberate because right now, for all the reasons that we've covered, it is important. And as we look at these two tools, this understanding of emotion and why it's important will cut across everything we're going to talk about now. So there's many customer experience tools that you can use to help you ensure your customers have a great experience. Having a great customer experience strategy is one. Knowing your customer experience maturity is another. But the two that I've selected that I want to talk to you about that I think are the most beneficial at this moment in time are insights and journey mapping. So with customer insights, and in a moment I'm going to ask you if anybody has done any voice of customer surveys before. But with insights, what I would say at the moment is that I would recommend that now is not the time to be doing a full customer survey, a full sort of customer relationship survey. I don't think customers would thank you. And also depending on where they are on the corona coaster when they answer, and where we are in the pandemic, the insights may not actually even be that helpful. Added to which there's often a bit of a lag time with surveys from between launch and results. And at a time when conditions can change from hour to hour or day to day, that can be too long to deliver the most useful perspective. And they can also be costly. And so for many organisations, for instance, we had 50% of those listening today where their business has suffered detrimentally. So for many organisations in that situation where you might be facing cost cutting, this is also, too expensive to do. So it may not be an option that's available. So my recommendation is to look to find quick and novel ways to keep a pulse on customer sentiment and also to use more in structured mechanisms. So for example, the obvious one, talk to your customers, find ways to find out what they think of their current experience with you. Maybe through small telephone or email samples. And perhaps think about maybe a mini pulse, so perhaps just 2 questions. How are we doing during coronavirus? How can we do better? But with this, remembering that if you ask, and if they say you're doing something wrong, you've got to sort of close that loop and you need to go back and tell them what you're going to do to fix it and obviously try and fix it. Customer community platforms can also be quite useful. I did this in my last role, and the insights are really useful. They're fast, granular, you get a lot more detail because you've got a dialogue going, and they're relatively cheap to collect. And this can be done very simply through one of the community platforms that exist or even by Zoom. Another way is to tap into insights from social media. What are customers in your sector saying? It doesn't have to necessarily just be about your organisation. You can be looking more broadly. And obviously you can also collect customer experience insights from any live chat or website behaviour or customer reviews that you have. And then a critical one is to listen to employees, obviously those that are on the front line who have got day-to-day interaction with customers. So listen to the salespeople, onboarding people, support, customer service, finance people, product people, you know, the list goes on. And now's a good time to make sure that the collection of these insights is helpful to providing something that's actionable for you. A bit more on the next slide about employees, but just before I do that, I mentioned about the poll, and I'm just interested to know what's been your experience of doing voice of customer research in the past, and whether you've been able to act on it, what the impact has been. And I guess maybe if you haven't done a voice of customer research in the past, maybe just say small or no impact.
I think that's just answered the main question, Anne.
Right.
People have suddenly filled it out.
Okay.
I'll share the things that you can see.
Okay. So no impact, right? Small no impact. But that might have been that that you've not actually carried out a survey. Okay. Right. Okay. So right. Okay, well, just for the reasons that I've said anyway, I think voice of customer at the moment, I think there is, you know, it wouldn't be a big survey, it wouldn't be time to do a big survey. So how can you get other insights? And I've mentioned the sweet spot of voice of customer, voice of employee, and voice of process. So these can add sort of, you know, more, using the three together can be really powerful. So what is voice of employee? Voice of employee, some people may call this your employee engagement survey. And quite often this might be done by the HR or people team. And in the past, they've been done separately to voice of customer. But some organisations are bringing the two together, and the timing of the two together, because one does influence the other. How your employees are feeling does influence the type of experience that your customers are getting. And I think in particular now is the time to understand your employee experience, because so many aspects of employee experience can have an impact on customer experience. And if ever there was a good time for customer experience and employee experience to work in unison, I think it is now. And whether employees are returning to work from furlough, are encountering an altered working environment, or are continuing to work from home, they continue to be the first point of contact for customers connecting with your organisation. And of course, they will have their own Corona coaster experience, which will impact on when they show up for work. And so voice of employee allows you to see if your employees feel supported, enabled to work in different circumstances, and therefore engaged and prepared to go the extra mile on behalf of customers. And the important thing to be aware of is that if employees feel supported, it will reflect positively on customer experience. And if they don't, then the opposite is true, and the customer experience is likely to suffer if your workforce feel poorly supported. It all probably feels pretty obvious, but it is worth checking and being aware of. So voice of process is kind of what it says. It's actually looking at what the processes in your organisations are telling you. What processes are generating a suboptimal experience. Maybe what are the irritants that you already know exist? How do the handoffs work? Which handoffs cause concern? What are the unresolved issues that irritate both employees and customers? For instance, are there backlogs in IT, for instance, that are needing workarounds and causing delays and problems? So using the three sources of insight together can help you to rapidly identify the most important issues to resolve to improve customer experience. So I'm sorry about all this work I'm asking you to do. Before we go on to the next tool of journey mapping, I'd like to know what's been your experience of doing journey mapping. I'm sure many of you will have undertaken journey mapping, but let's see. And then, have you found it useful? So maybe let me know in the chat, have you done journey mapping in the past, but also have you redone it in the light of the current crisis? Okay, so we'll put that into the chat. Maybe for some organisations, if you're a sort of a consultant perhaps, and you're intimately involved with your customer's journey, maybe in the past it's not been something that's felt appropriate to do because you are so connected with every single bit of your customer's journey. So let's have a look and see. There. So not in a formal way. Yes, we've done journey mapping, but not in the light of the current situation, never done it. Not in a formal way, more informal. Informal, we look at the website journey for people to join or to join events, but it's not a formal map. Okay, right. Okay, so in which case then, I'm happy to talk about give some more information on that. Okay, so journey mapping. I'm sure you've probably all seen sort of the journey maps with the post-it notes on, and then you might have seen the smiley faces or the not smiley faces as people try to pin a sort of emotion on what the touch point is. So what is journey mapping? It is a visual representation of every experience your customer has with you. And it is one of the most powerful customer experience tools you can use. It's an excellent tool for identifying where you can improve the customer's experience. Or if I can put it another way, it's a business optimization tool because it identifies the opportunities where you can improve customer acquisition, customer retention, and growth. And so it's an ideal tool for helping you to get into the mind of your customer. And so you can see, because of what we know now about customers changing emotions and their needs and behaviours, how useful that might be to understand each point of interaction that they have with you in the light of maybe some changing emotions and behaviours. So basically, as I said, it provides a visual representation of a typical journey where you plot the journey from initial engagement through the whole lifetime journey, covering every single touch point that the customer has with your business. So that will be online, telephone, face-to-face. So customers are different, and so they're usually grouped into what you call personas. And the map will show for each touch point that the customer has with your business what outcomes the customer is trying to achieve and what obstacles they face. And so it's important to note that it's not a process map, as that's got a very internal perspective. It is a map that sees things from the customer's perspective. And so there's lots of benefits to doing journey mapping, but the ones I want to mention really are the ones that are relevant to the current situation. And as I just briefly mentioned, it allows you to pinpoint exactly which interactions have the greatest impact on customer perceptions. And bearing in mind what we said about emotion, if you map the journey, you should be able to see which touch points have the greatest impact now and obtain greater clarity on how to intervene to improve the customer experience. By understanding the complete end-to-end journey, you also open up new opportunities to improve your offer and protect cash flow. Because poor customer journeys can inhibit conversion. And so they reduce revenue and also discourage customers from returning or expanding their relationship. And as many customers are now completing their purchase online, are there something to think about is, are there parts of the journey maybe where they leave your website before you want them to? And if they do, the touch point analysis, the journey mapping allows you to look at where is it that they actually leave, and why, dive deeper into that to understand why. Is it that there's more information that they want? When they do find you, what are the things that they're actually on your website? What are they actually searching for? And do you have enough supporting content for that particular part of the journey? So attention to those things can help you convert more visitors, and also by increasing or improving your content in that area, it also gives you new insights to acquire new customers. So by breaking down each stage of the journey like this into smaller tasks, you can look at each touch point and also ask, is it effortless and stress-free? How much time does the customer need to spend on the task? Is there a wait time? Is it convenient to them, both in terms of when and where they connect to you? And remember, if you identify any delays, that it's really important that you've got some communications built in to explain the reason for the delay and update on when it's likely to be resolved. So another tool that you can use with journey mapping is path analysis. And I find this is really good to help with good decision making, because it shows the frequency of the paths followed by customers, the volumes of business that you have going through each path, and the costs of each path. And you can see the most frequently desired outcomes and the most profitable outcomes. It also helps you to see the obstacles to achieving those outcomes. And so it's a really good tool to use with it. So just to sum up, I hope that you found the webinar useful. And you can see why I'm so excited about the tools of customer experience management and why I think they're so helpful to helping you to achieve your business goals. But the reality of where we are now is that changing customer behaviours are likely to influence future buying decisions and loyalty. And so by using the customer experience tools that I've shown you, you can identify which ones to use to capture the changes to customer behaviours and needs, and how to use it to turn any current pain into opportunity. And so just before I stop for a few questions, I just want to leave you with another wonderful bit of science, and that's the peak end rule. I don't know how many of you already know about this one, but I'm going to go through it with you. If it's particularly useful, if having considered everything we've spoken about, and you're not sure where to start, this one bit of science might help, giving a tip on where to start with improving your customer experience. So various different studies were carried out by Daniel Kahneman and others, mainly relating to pain. And he discovered two things. People remember the peak and the end of an experience. And so the peak end rule says that what we actually remember about the experience is the strongest emotion that we felt, which was the peak. And then we also remember how the experience ended. So in practice, if we deliver a really good customer experience, but if the last thing that happens is bad, then that's what the customer remembers. So their memory of dealing with you is a bad memory. So it's really important to make sure that the end of the journey, and remember this is for every single little touch point, every time they're connecting with you, that the end of that experience is good. They'll also remember the peak that triggered the strongest emotion. So if the overall experience was up and down, a wow experience that really connected with them and made them feel good, mixed with some not so good things, they will view this as better than an overall average experience. So something that can give a peak, and this is if things are not going too well, is to recover the experience in the experience. And that can create a good memory and a peak experience. So you might want to think about how you create these peaks and think about the end of the experience more often. And this is particularly useful if you're short on resources to throw at improvements, or you want to know where to start. Think about applying this. And what's so important at the moment is because this emotional roller coaster, and so if you can create that emotional connection with people and create some peaks, then they will remember that favourably. Okay, so I think we've got just 10 minutes left, and I welcome some questions in the chat. I'll try and answer as many as possible, and any that I don't have time to answer, I can write up afterwards and distribute through Cambridge Network, or you're welcome to email me with any questions, and link with me too if you're happy to. And maybe in the chat you can let me know if you have learned anything today that you could go away and put into practice, if there has been anything, if we've achieved that.
No, thank you, Anne. Impeccable timing, I have to say, which is great from my point of view. Yeah, we're happy to share whatever you would like us to share. We'll send a feedback. Well, not really a feedback email, an email with resources on it and the link to this video as well. Catherine has a question. Which of the two tools is the one that you would use first?
Okay. I think it does depend on maybe on individual circumstances, but I think by starting with journey mapping, it very quickly you can identify which points in the journey you don't actually know, you're not that well informed about, that you actually don't know what the customer's true feeling is. So it then encourages you then to go and get a few more insights on that particular part of the journey. That's a good question, thank you.
Can you see Jane's comment about the peak end rule? I agree, Jane, that will be useful.
Good. Yeah.
She says, like the peak end rule, it will be very useful.
So I think with it's quite interesting how sort of people's memory of experiences is what's important, because we often hear this thing, oh, you've got to delight your customer. But actually in customer experience terms, we don't necessarily say go out and try and delight your customers, because once you've delighted somebody once, in order to delight them the second time, you've got to, there's a bit of an arms race going on. You've got to do something better each time. So the better thing is actually to try and sort of connect with them emotionally and give them a really good, strong emotional feeling through the experience.
Yeah, it's interesting, the bringing in emotion, which you never sort of think about in business. I think before it's always been quite a de-emotionalized environment, but it's nice to see it becoming more human. And I've seen that kind of trend across several webinars, actually, not just our own, but others I've been doing as well. I've been looking at some marketing ones, and emotion has started to come into that as well, which is interesting. Interesting area. Well, if we have no more questions, sorry, Anne, did I just cut you off?
Right. No, that's okay. I was just going to say the thing about emotions that absolutely surprises me is the fact that it's so important in the B2B environment as well.
Yeah, yeah. Jill, you can't hear anything. We're just about to finish. That's interesting. I'll catch up with you later, Jill, and find out what happened there. We do have a video you can watch later. So yeah, we'll be sharing this certainly on YouTube. We've been videoing it, and Anne will put it on her LinkedIn as well, so we share it to her too. So you'll be able to catch up with things there. And I'm sorry if your experience of the whole talk with not being able to hear anything was not very good. But Anne, thank you very, very much. Thank you for the compliment to Cambridge Network in the middle, which I had no idea you were going to do. So that was lovely. That's a trait of the perfect speaker. So yeah, I think I just wish everybody have a lovely day. I hope you get some sun before it disappears over the weekend. And yeah, we'll send out all of Anne's details, and I'm sure she'll be happy to correspond with you on any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye all.